When pricing an electrical remodel, several factors come into play. The size of the house is a primary consideration. A 1648 square foot house is relatively large, requiring more wire, outlets, and switches compared to a smaller dwelling. Replacing the existing electrical service with a new 200 amp service is a significant and labor-intensive task that significantly adds to the overall cost. The requested additional items, such as 6 phone outlets, 3 recessed can lights, 6 dimmers, 3 of which are 3-way dimmers, and 2 outdoor lights, substantially increase the scope of work and the amount of materials required for the project. The time required to rough in and trim a house of this size typically takes a skilled electrician 2 to 3 days, sometimes longer depending on the complexity of the wiring and the specific details of the remodel. Based on these factors, a price of $3,500 for 1648 square foot house with a new service, additional outlets, and features appears to be on the low side. A more reasonable pricing range for this project would likely fall between $4,500 and $8,000. Firstly, the low end of this range, $4,500 to $5,000, might be appropriate if the wiring is relatively straightforward and the electrician can efficiently complete the work. Secondly, a mid-range price of $5,500 to $6,500 would be suitable for a project with some complexities, or if the electrician needs to spend more time on tasks like installing the recessed lighting or dealing with older wiring. Thirdly, the high end of the range, $7,000 to $8,000, would be justified if the project involves significant challenges such as difficult access, extensive modifications to the existing wiring, or the need to coordinate with other trades. If the agreed upon price of $3,500 seems too low, approach the client and explain the concerns politely. Emphasize the following points. 1. The size and complexity of the project. 2. The labor time required to complete the work to a high standard. 3. The additional outlets and features requested beyond the basic wiring. 4. The cost of materials, including the new 200 amp service panel, wiring, outlets, switches, and lighting fixtures. 5. The electrician's experience and expertise as a licensed professional. Providing a clear breakdown of the costs and the time involved can help the client understand the value of the services and justify a higher price. It's crucial to price electrical services fairly and accurately to ensure profitability and maintain customer satisfaction. Undervaluing the work can lead to financial strain and compromise the quality of the installation. Conversely, overpricing can deter potential clients. A balanced approach that considers all the factors involved is essential for success in the electrical contracting business. When determining the price for an electrical remodel, several key aspects need to be carefully considered. One of the most significant factors is the size of the house. A larger house naturally requires more materials and labor to wire than a smaller one. This includes not only the amount of wire needed but also the number of outlets, switches, and lighting fixtures. For instance, a 1648 square foot house, as mentioned, is a relatively substantial size, meaning it will require significant investment in materials and labor. Another crucial element to consider is the installation of a new 200 amp electrical service. This is a major undertaking that involves replacing the existing service panel and upgrading the wiring to accommodate the increased amperage. This task alone can take a full day or more for a skilled electrician and requires specialized knowledge and equipment. Therefore, it should be factored into the overall price accordingly. The addition of extra features such as phone outlets, recessed can lights, dimmers, and outdoor lights further increases the scope of the project and adds to the cost. Each of these items requires additional wiring, installation time, and materials. For example, recessed lighting often involves cutting into ceilings and running wires in tight spaces, which can be time-consuming. Similarly, installing dimmers, especially 3-way dimmers, requires careful wiring to ensure proper functionality. The amount of time it will take to complete the job is another important consideration. For a house of this size with the specified additions, a skilled electrician would typically need at least 2 to 3 days to complete the rough-in and trim work. Often involves installing the wiring and boxes before the walls are finished, while trim work includes installing the outlets, switches, and lighting fixtures after the walls are completed. It is essential to accurately estimate the time required for each phase of the project to ensure that the price reflects the actual labor costs. When calculating the price, it is also crucial to factor in the cost of materials. This includes not only the cost of the wire, outlets, switches, and lighting fixtures, but also the cost of the new service panel, conduit, connectors, and other miscellaneous items. It is advisable to obtain quotes from multiple suppliers to ensure that you are getting the best possible prices on materials. In addition to the direct costs of materials and labor, it is also important to factor in overhead costs such as insurance, vehicle expenses, and office expenses. These costs can add up significantly and should be included in the price to ensure that the business remains profitable. Based on all of these factors, a price of $3,500 for a 1648 square foot house with a new service and the specified additions seems quite low. A more realistic price range would likely be between $4,500 and $8,000, depending on the specific details of the project and the electrician's experience and overhead costs. If the agreed upon price of $3,500 seems too low, approach the client and explain the concerns in a professional and courteous manner. Emphasize the size and complexity of the project, the labor time required, the additional outlets and features, the cost of materials, and the electrician's experience and expertise. Providing a detailed breakdown of the costs can help the client understand the value of the services and justify a higher price. It is also important to be prepared to negotiate with the client. Be willing to make reasonable concessions, but do not undervalue the work to the point where it is no longer profitable. It is better to walk away from a project than to take it on at a loss. Ultimately, the goal is to price the services fairly and accurately to ensure both profitability and customer satisfaction. By carefully considering all of the factors involved and communicating effectively with the client, you can arrive at a price that is fair to both parties. Remember to always prioritize safety and quality in your work. Do not cut corners to save time or money. Use high-quality materials and follow all applicable electrical codes and regulations. A job well done will not only ensure customer satisfaction but also protect the electrician from liability. Furthermore, consider the impact of the new service on the home's overall electrical capacity. A 200 amp service is a common upgrade, but it's important to ensure that it's sufficient for the current and future needs of the homeowner. This might involve discussing potential appliance upgrades or future additions to the home that could increase electrical demand. In terms of specific tasks, installing recessed lights requires careful planning and execution. Consider the type of insulation in the ceiling and choose fixtures that are IC-rated insulation contact if they will be in direct contact with insulation. Also, ensure proper spacing and alignment of the lights for optimal illumination. When installing dimmers, it's important to select dimmers that are compatible with the type of lighting being used, whether it's incandescent, LED, or fluorescent. Three-way dimmers require a specific wiring configuration to function correctly, so pay close attention to the wiring diagrams. Outdoor lighting should be weatherproof and installed in accordance with local codes. Consider using LED fixtures, which are energy efficient and long-lasting. Phone outlets are becoming less common as more people rely on cell phones, but if the homeowner specifically requests them, ensure they are properly wired and connected to the phone service. When providing the estimate, be transparent about the scope of work and any potential challenges that could arise. This will help build trust with the client and avoid misunderstandings later on. It's also a good idea to include a clause in the contract that allows for adjustments to the price if unforeseen issues are discovered during the project. For example, if the existing wiring is found to be in poor condition and needs to be replaced, this could add to the overall cost. In conclusion, pricing an electrical remodel requires careful consideration of various factors, including the size of the house, the installation of a new service, additional features, labor time, and material costs. By accurately assessing these factors and communicating effectively with the client, you can arrive at a price that is fair to both parties and ensures a successful project. Pricing an electrical remodel, especially one involving a new service and additional features, requires a detailed assessment of several key elements. Overlooking any of these aspects can lead to underbidding, which can negatively impact profitability and potentially compromise the quality of the work. Firstly, the size of the house is a fundamental factor. A larger house inherently demands more wiring, outlets, switches, and lighting fixtures. The square footage directly correlates to the quantity of materials and the amount of labor required to complete the job. Therefore, accurately measuring the house's dimensions is crucial for an accurate estimate. Secondly, upgrading to a new 200 amp service is a substantial undertaking. This involves replacing the existing service panel, upgrading the wiring from the meter to the panel, and ensuring that the grounding system is adequate. This task requires specialized knowledge, tools, and adherence to local electrical codes. The cost of the new service panel itself, the wiring, and the labor involved can be significant and must be carefully factored into the overall price. Thirdly, the additional features requested by the client significantly impact the scope and cost of the project. Each phone outlet, recessed light, dimmer switches, especially three-way dimmers, and outdoor light adds to the material costs and labor time. Recessed lighting, for example, often requires cutting into ceilings, running new wiring, and ensuring proper insulation to prevent fire hazards. Dimmers, particularly three-way dimmers, require more complex wiring configurations than standard switches. And outdoor lighting must be weatherproof and installed according to code to ensure safety. Fourthly, labor time is a critical component of the pricing. Accurately estimating the time required for each phase of the project, including rough-in, trim, and service upgrade, is essential. This requires experience and a thorough understanding of the tasks involved. Factors such as the complexity of the wiring, the accessibility of the work areas, and the presence of any unforeseen challenges can all impact the time required to complete the job. Fifthly, material costs must be carefully considered. This includes not only the cost of the major components, such as the service panel, wiring, outlets, and lighting fixtures, but also the cost of smaller items such as connectors, conduit, and mounting hardware. Obtaining quotes from multiple suppliers can help ensure that the best possible prices are being obtained. Sixthly, overhead costs must be factored into the pricing. This includes expenses such as insurance, vehicle expenses, office rent, and advertising. These costs are often overlooked but can significantly impact profitability. A percentage of these overhead costs should be allocated to each project to ensure that the business remains financially viable. Seventhly, profit margin is the final component of the pricing. This is the amount of money that the business needs to earn on each project to cover its expenses and generate a profit for the owners. A reasonable profit margin should be included in the pricing to ensure the long-term sustainability of the business. Based on these factors, a price of $3,500 for a 1648 square foot house with a new 200 amp service and the specified additional features seems unrealistically low. A more reasonable price range would likely fall between $4,500 and $8,000, depending on the specific details of the project, the electrician's experience, and the overhead costs. If the agreed upon price is significantly lower than what is considered reasonable, it is important to approach the client and explain the concerns in a professional and courteous manner. Emphasize the size and complexity of the project, the labor time required, the cost of materials, and the expertise and experience that the electrician brings to the table. Providing a detailed breakdown of the costs can help the client understand the value of the services being provided and justify a higher price. It is also important to be prepared to negotiate with the client. Be willing to make reasonable concessions, but do not undervalue the work to the point where it is no longer profitable. It is better to walk away from a project than to take it on at a loss. When pricing electrical work, it's important to understand how certain codes and standards relate to the scope of the project. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, provides guidelines for safe electrical installations. For example, NEC Section 210.11 covers branch circuits required in dwellings, specifying the number and type of circuits needed for lighting, appliances, and general use. This will directly influence the amount of wiring and devices required. NEC Section 220.12 addresses general lighting loads for dwelling units. The code specifies a minimum lighting load based on the square footage of the house. This ensures that there is adequate capacity for lighting throughout the home. NEC Section 250 covers grounding and bonding requirements, which are crucial for safety. Proper grounding helps to prevent electrical shock and minimize the risk of fire. NEC Section 310.15 outlines ampacity tables for conductors, specifying the maximum current that different sizes of wire can safely carry. This is important for selecting the correct wire size for each circuit. Understanding these code requirements is essential for ensuring that the electrical installation is safe, compliant, and meets the needs of the homeowner. It also helps to justify the pricing, as compliance with these codes adds to the cost of materials and labor. For example, Table 310.15b16 in the NEC provides ampacity values for insulated conductors rated up to 600 volts. This table is used to determine the appropriate wire size for various circuits based on the expected current load. If a circuit is expected to carry 20 amps, for instance, the table would indicate that a 12 American wire gauge copper conductor is required, assuming certain insulation types and temperature ratings. Another relevant NEC section is 110.3, which covers examination, identification, installation, and use of equipment. This section emphasizes the importance of using equipment that is listed or labeled for its intended purpose and installing it according to the manufacturer's instructions. This ensures that the electrical system is safe and reliable. The specific requirements for installing a 200 amp service are detailed in NEC Article 230, Services. This article covers everything from the service entrance conductors to the service disconnect and overcurrent protection. It also addresses grounding and bonding requirements for the service. In addition to the NEC, local building codes and regulations may also apply to the electrical installation. It is important to check with the local building department to ensure that the work complies with all applicable codes. When pricing the electrical remodel, it is helpful to break down the cost into different categories, such as materials, labor, and overhead. This makes it easier to track expenses and ensure that the price is accurate. For example, the material cost could be broken down into the cost of the service panel, wiring, outlets, switches, lighting fixtures, and other miscellaneous items. The labor cost could be broken down into the time required for rough-in, trim, service upgrade, and any other tasks. The overhead costs could include insurance, vehicle expenses, office expenses, and advertising. By breaking down the costs in this way, it is easier to identify areas where costs can be reduced without compromising the quality or safety of the work. It also makes it easier to explain the pricing to the client and justify the value of the services being provided. In addition to the technical aspects of pricing an electrical remodel, it is also important to consider the customer service aspects. Building a good relationship with the client is essential for success. This includes communicating effectively, being responsive to their needs, and providing high-quality work. It is also important to be professional and courteous at all times. This will help to build trust and ensure that the client is satisfied with the work. If the client is happy with the work, they are more likely to recommend the electrician to others. This can lead to more business and a good reputation in the community. In conclusion, pricing an electrical remodel requires a combination of technical knowledge, business acumen, and customer service skills. By carefully considering all of the factors involved and communicating effectively with the client, you can arrive at a price that is fair to both parties and ensures a successful project. Remember to always prioritize safety and quality in your work and to build a good relationship with the client.